All right, next up is the SD card. Stands for Secure Digital. It's just a way of recording information. Sometimes there's hard drives, sometimes there's regular SD cards, sometimes there's micro SD cards, like we do have a GoPro or two that does require micro SD. And so this basically is a way to store digital information from our camera and allows us to put it into computers and transfer that information. So the way it works is there's these little metal plates on the back, and there's these little fingers that look like wires almost on the inside that rest on top of these, and so that's how they transfer the information. So the way I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show you guys, is you take your SD card like this, you insert it into here. Now if you notice, it doesn't go in this way, does it? Most cameras, these metal prongs will always go towards the big side of the camera. So the way I always tell students is if you're holding the camera and you see the battery, you should see the number right here. With our SD cards, there is going to be a number for what class period it is, dash, and what camera number you are. Okay? So we have a SD card for every class period and every camera that we have. That way you don't have to worry about someone else getting onto your footage or erasing your footage. We all have our own SD card for each group, and it has that period number and then the camera number. So again, hold the camera like this, insert it to where you see the numbers towards the battery. You're going to push it in all the way. You hear a little click. Then there's a door here. You got to make sure you close the door. Okay? To take it out, you always want to make sure that your camera is off. Just because it may be finalizing something, make sure your camera's off first, so I powered it off. Open the door, you push in. It pops out just a tiny little bit, enough to where you can grab it with your fingers, and there's your SD card. We keep our SD cards, I have a little case for each class period, so it keeps things sorted, and I just pull out the cards for that class period so we don't mix up with other classes throughout the day. One last thing on the SD cards. I always forget this part. On the SD card, on the very side of it, okay, there's a little switch. It's gray. If you push that switch down accidentally, your camera might say locked card. What that means is this is a secure way to where if you don't want things erased, you can just pull that switch down and you can't record over the top of it. You can't erase it. Your card is locked. It's only read-only. Here is the problem. We've had some students in the past mess with this switch, and if that switch pops off, you can't use that SD card anymore. It's basically a read-only card. You can't record on it anymore. And then that's like, uh-oh, that's bad. So we always want to be able to record them, so don't mess with that switch. Sometimes that switch can get bumped accidentally when you're taking your card in and out. So if it says card lock, pop it out, take a look at it, push that switch up away from the lock symbol on there, put it in again, and you should be good to go on your recording. If not, tell a teacher, tell me, and I'll take a look at it for you. One other thing to mention here on these SD cards, there is some information. So when you're buying SD cards, there's read-write speeds, and there's different classifications. So for us, if you're doing HD video, you need at least a class 10. They're now into the Ultra or the U. This card happens to say that it is a class 10 with this circle that's right there with the 10, and you might see like a U and a 1 for like Ultra 1 sometimes. That's how fast the SD card can record. So it depends if you're in HD, and sometimes these 4K cameras, 4K just stands for 4 times as much information as HD. And then you'll see how many gigabytes it holds. With HD cameras, they go through pretty fast. So even like this 64 gig card, as you saw on there with the settings we had, was 5 hours. But if you went on 4K, next thing you know, instead of 5 hours, you only have like an hour of record time on this size of card. So that can be an issue depending on what settings you use, especially on your cell phones. Some of these cell phones record great video, but if you put it at the very highest, the 4K, it's going to eat up a lot of space right away. So with what we're doing, I would recommend just going at the 1080 setting. We usually do 1080, like 30p or 60p. The frame rate is usually, if you have higher frame rate, it captures the action, the movement, like sports better. And the lower frame rate actually captures more details better. So that's how we determine kind of what we're recording in. And so I usually keep it at 60 just in case there's fast movement and stuff. Sometimes I'll drop it down, but these cameras, we record usually in that frame rate. When you first put an SD card in your camera for the very first time, you have to erase the contents on that. That's called formatting. So if you have a camera at home and you put an SD card in it, the very first thing you have to do is format the SD card. What that does is it erases anything that's on there and puts a file in there that says, hey, this is where I'm going to store and communicate with the camera all the information right here. If you don't format it, you can hit record and it might say it's recording, but when you go to play it back, it's not going to show it. So you got to be careful on when you're first using an SD card. Always format, erase everything on there, and follow basically what it's telling you to do on the camera when it comes to, especially in the instructions on how to format if it's not the school's cameras. I usually erase everything on there, and I do that stuff for you so you don't have to worry about erasing your cards in class.